Approximately 800 words, simple English, third-person style. They did not call her by a name. They did not see her as a person. They only called her a pleasure animal. She was young, thin, and silent. Her hands were bound with metal cuffs. Her eyes had no light, only shadows. She was not born for this life. She was taken. Taken when her people lost the war. Taken when her world burned in fire and screams. Now, she was nothing more than a prize. The soldiers gathered in the large hall. Their boots made heavy sounds on the metal floor. They laughed, shouted, and drank bitter-smelling liquid. Smoke filled the room. On the stage, guards pulled her forward. A chain rattled as she walked. Her steps were weak, but she did not fall. The commander stood at the center. His armor was black and red, his voice cold like iron. He raised his hand to silence the noise. "Tonight," he said, "our victory is complete. The enemy is destroyed. Their men are dead. Their women are ours." And here he pulled her chain harshly, making her stumble. "Is the finest reward. She is yours. A pleasure animal." The soldiers cheered. The sound shook the walls. Some banged on the tables, others shouted ugly words. Their eyes burned with hunger, but not for food. She stood in front of them, her head down. She did not cry. She had no more tears left. Inside her heart, she remembered a time when she had a name. When she was someone's daughter, someone's sister. She remembered a little garden, sunlight, and laughter. But those memories felt far away. Like dreams she could never reach again. Now she was nothing but silence. The commander pulled her forward and said, "She belongs to whoever pleases me most tonight. Whoever fights hardest, drinks hardest, laughs hardest. She will be given as reward." The crowd cheered again. Cups were raised. Songs were shouted. But in the middle of that noise, one man stayed quiet. He was young, a soldier like the others. His uniform was the same. His face carried scars. His eyes carried years of war. But unlike the others, his gaze was not burning with desire. It was heavy, filled with something else, something even he did not understand. When he looked at her, he did not see an animal. He saw fear. He saw pain. He saw a human. The girl raised her head for a moment. Just a moment. Their eyes met. Hers were tired, almost empty. But he felt something move inside him. A voice in his chest whispered, "She is not what they say. She is more." The night grew louder. Soldiers drank until the tables shook. One man shouted, "Give her to me first. I fought harder than all of you." Another argued. A fight broke out, fists and bottles flying. The commander laughed, enjoying the chaos, and she stood there like a statue, waiting for her fate. But in her chest, a small spark refused to die. She did not know why. She did not know how. But when that one soldier's eyes met hers, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope. It was fragile, like a candle in the storm. But it was there. The soldier looked away quickly, afraid someone might notice. If anyone saw his eyes, they would question him. And questions were dangerous. Kindness was dangerous. To see her as human was the greatest crime here. Still, the thought stayed in his mind. She deserves more than this. The night went on. Laughter, music, the smell of fire and alcohol filled the hall. The commander's voice cut through the noise. "Enough. Tomorrow, at dawn, the games continue. Whoever proves their loyalty to me shall take her as reward." The soldiers shouted, "Yes, Commander." Their voices shook the room. The girl was pulled back into the shadows. Her chain dragged on the floor, echoing like thunder in her ears. She returned to her small, dark corner. Her body was tired, but her mind stayed awake. She thought of that soldier. She thought of the strange look in his eyes. It was not like the others. It was not fire, not hunger, not cruelty. It was something softer, something she could not name. For the first time in a long time, she dared to ask herself a question. Could there be one human who does not see me as an animal? And in that question lived a dangerous hope. She closed her eyes and waited for morning, because tomorrow her fate would be decided, and tomorrow she would meet the man who might change everything. Approximately 800 words. Simple English, third-person style. The hall was silent again. The smoke from last night still hung in the air like a ghost. Broken cups lay on the floor, and the smell of sweat and blood refused to leave. She sat in the shadows, her wrists heavy with chains. The guards had pushed her there after the feast. Her body was weak, but her mind refused to sleep. She was waiting for what she did not know. Morning came with the sound of boots. Soldiers marched outside, their voices rough and loud. Today was the day the commander had promised. Today, they would fight for her like she was nothing more than a trophy. But one man was not thinking about the fight. He was the quiet soldier. His name was hidden under dust and war, but his eyes still carried something human. He had seen her face last night. He had seen her lift her head for only a moment. That moment was burning inside him like a secret fire he could not put out. The commander entered the hall. His voice cut the air like a blade. Today, we test loyalty. Today, strength and blood will earn reward. She, he pointed to the girl, belongs to the winner. The soldiers shouted, raising their weapons. The noise shook the walls again, but the quiet soldier did not shout. He kept his eyes on her. She was shaking, but she tried to hide it. Her chains rattled softly, almost like a whisper. Save me. He felt his chest grow heavy. He had killed in war. He had burned cities. He had obeyed orders. But this felt wrong in a way the battlefield never did. When the fights began, the hall turned into madness. Soldiers smashed each other with fists, with knives, with whatever they could grab. Blood spilled, teeth broke, men roared like beasts. The commander laughed. To him, this was joy. And through it all, the quiet soldier stood still. He did not fight. He did not raise his hands. He only watched her. One soldier noticed and sneered. "What's wrong?" "Afraid you cannot win her." The quiet soldier answered in a low voice, "She is not a prize." The man laughed in his face. "Then she is nothing." He rushed into the fight again, leaving the words like poison in the air. But the quiet soldier's heart was louder than the shouts. Not nothing, he thought. Never nothing. Hours passed. The games ended. The strongest soldier, covered in blood, raised his weapon and cried out for victory. The commander cheered and gave him the chain. "She is yours tonight." The hall exploded with laughter again. The girl felt her knees weaken. Another cage, another night, another owner. Hope was a cruel dream. But then, in the noise, she felt it again. A gaze, soft, different. She looked up and saw him, the quiet soldier, watching her. His lips moved, almost soundless. One word, "Wait." She froze. Did he really say that? Or was it her broken mind playing tricks? The victorious soldier dragged her by the chain. She stumbled, her hands scraping the floor. The others shouted, mocking, cheering. But in the shadows, the quiet soldier moved. He followed them, not with hunger, not with greed, but with something else. Something forbidden. Night came again. She sat in another corner, chained to a post. The victor had fallen asleep, drunk and careless. She sat still, eyes empty. Then she heard it. A small sound, metal scraping softly. She turned. The quiet soldier knelt beside her. His eyes were sharp but kind. His hand moved quickly, checking the chains. Her voice broke into a whisper. Why? He looked at her and said only this, because you are not an animal. Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they broke the wall inside her. No one had said anything like that since the day her world ended. He pressed his hand gently on her arm. A human touch, not a master's grip. Then he whispered, My name is Kale, and you. You will not die nameless, for the first time. She felt a tear slide down her cheek knot of pain, but of something long forgotten. And in that moment, under the shadow of war and chains, a dangerous bond was born. Approximately 800 words, simple English, third-person style. The night was cold. The hall was silent. Only the sound of dripping water echoed in the corners. She sat against the wall, her wrists still chained, her eyes heavy. Across the room, the drunken soldier who had won her was asleep, face buried in the table. Empty cups surrounded him. His snores were loud, but his grip on her chain had fallen loose. From the shadows, he appeared. Kelda. The quiet soldier moved carefully, his boots soft on the ground. His eyes searched the room, making sure no guard was awake. Then he crouched beside her. She froze. Was this another trick? Another cruelty? But his hands were gentle. He whispered, Do not be afraid. I will not harm you. Her breath was shaky. No man had spoken to her like that in a long time. He took the chain slowly, careful not to make sound. He checked the lock, his fingers brushing the cold metal. He could not break it now, but he could make her sit more comfortably. Small kindness, but it was something. She whispered back, her voice rough from silence. Why do you look at me like this? Kale's eyes softened. He wanted to say many things, that she looked like his sister before the war, that she reminded him of the innocence this world had lost, that she was a mirror of his guilt. But he only said, Because you are not what they call you. You are not an animal. Her heart trembled. Those words again, she asked, almost like a child. Then, what am I? For a moment, Kale was quiet. His mind searched for the answer. Then he smiled sadly and whispered, You are a person, and a person must have a name. Her eyes widened. A name. She had almost forgotten what that word felt like. Once, long ago, she had a name. Her parents had spoken it with love, but war had stolen it. Chains had buried it. The world had erased it. A name. She whispered, her lips shaking. Kale nodded. Yes, without a name, they control you. With a name, you belong to yourself again. She lowered her head. I do not remember mine. That's fine, Kale said softly. Then I will give you one. A name no one can take from you. She looked at him, her eyes shining with fear and wonder. What name? He paused. He thought of the stars outside, shining even in the darkest sky. He thought of music he once heard, a voice that carried hope. Then the word came to him, simple and soft. Arya, he said. Your name is Arya. The sound of it filled the air like light. Her lips repeated it. Slowly, carefully, like tasting something new. Arya. Her chest tightened. Tears rose, uninvited, and fell down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, shaking silently. Kale touched her shoulder gently. Do not cry. A name is not weakness. It is strength. She looked up at him through her tears. Arya. I am Arya. Yes, he whispered firmly. You are Arya, and no matter what they say, you are more than what they made you. The moment hung in the air, fragile and powerful. For the first time, she felt alive. For the first time, she felt like herself. The drunk soldier stirred in his sleep. Kale quickly pulled back into the shadows. His finger pressed to his lips, warning her to stay silent. Her heart pounded. She held the name inside her chest, repeating it silently over and over. Arya, Arya, Arya. When the guard's footsteps echoed down the hall, she lowered her head again, pretending to be broken. But behind her eyes, the spark had grown brighter. She was no longer it. She was no longer animal. She was Arya, and though chains still bound her wrists, a part of her spirit had been freed. That night, as she closed her eyes, she whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Kale." No one heard her. But in her heart, she knew a dangerous truth. Hope was alive. Approximately 800 words. Simple English, third-person style, the next day. The camp woke to noise and iron. Soldiers sharpened blades, laughed, and shouted. Smoke from morning fires mixed with the cold wind. Arya sat in her corner, chained to the post. But inside her chest, something had changed. She whispered the word to herself again and again. Arya. It felt like a small flame in the dark. And she protected it with all her strength. No one else knew. No one else could know. Across the yard, Kale moved like the others, his face hard, his steps steady. To them, he was just another soldier. But his eyes, when they passed over her, carried a secret no one else could see. He had given her a name. And that name was now their dangerous secret. Later, when the sun burned low, Kale found a moment alone near her cage. He bent down, pretending to adjust his boots. His voice was a whisper, softer than the wind. Arya, her heart jumped. She looked up, her lips forming the word, Kale. For a moment, the world felt quiet, like they were the only two alive. But footsteps broke the silence. A guard walked past, his eyes sharp. Kale rose quickly, his face turning cold and empty like stone. He gave a soldier's salute and walked away. The guard looked at Arya suspiciously. "What are you staring at?" he barked. She lowered her eyes at once. The chain rattled as she bowed her head. The guard grunted and moved on. Arya's chest pounded. She had almost been caught. That night, Kale slipped back into the shadows of the hall. The others were drunk, playing games, too loud to notice him. He knelt near her again, his face serious. "You must be careful," he whispered. "If they know I speak to you, we are both dead." Arya nodded, her eyes wide. She wanted to tell him she understood, but her lips refused to move. Her fear was heavy. Kale saw it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread. He placed it on the floor between them. "Eat," he said. Her eyes filled with tears. Bread was nothing to the others, but to her it was life. She took it with shaking hands, whispering, "Thank you." Kale gave a faint smile. "You are not alone anymore. Remember that. But secrets cannot stay hidden forever." One soldier, sitting in the shadows with a bottle, watched them. His eyes narrowed. His lips twisted into a smile that was not kind. He said nothing that night. But in his heart, he carried the seed of suspicion days past. Every stolen moment between Arya and Kale was a risk. A glance, a whisper, a crumb of food eat, all carried the weight of death. But in those small moments, Arya learned something new. She learned to speak again. At first, only small words. "Arya Kale, food, thank you." Her voice was weak, but each word made her stronger. Kale listened with patience. He taught her carefully, as if the simple act of speaking was rebellion against the chains. One night, she asked him, "Why? Help me." Kale's eyes darkened. "Because I am tired of war. I am tired of being a monster. When I look at you, I remember I am human." Her heart shook. No one had ever spoken like this before. Not since the war. But before she could answer, the sound of boots echoed. Guards entered the hall. Kale pulled away fast, his face hard again. Arya lowered her head, pretending to sleep. The guards walked past, laughing about tomorrow's orders. But one of them stopped. He stared at her for a long moment. His eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, he smiled a cruel smile. "She's acting different," he muttered. The other guard shrugged. They all break in different ways. But the first guard shook his head. No, something's changed. Arya's blood turned cold. Did he know? Had he seen? When the guards left, she pressed her chains against her chest. Her secret felt heavy. Too heavy. That night, when Kale returned, she whispered in fear. "They know. They will find us." Kale's jaw tightened. He looked at her with fierce eyes. "Then we must be stronger. Whatever happens, Arya, remember this: your name is yours. They cannot take it away." Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold his words like a shield. But in the shadows, the soldier who had watched them before still waited. His smile was sharper now. Their secret was no longer safe. Approximately 800 words. Simple English, third-person style. The night was heavy with silence. The soldiers had drunk themselves to sleep, their laughter now nothing but echoes in the dark. The campfires burned low, throwing long shadows against the walls. Arya sat in her corner, whispering her name to herself like a prayer. Arya. I am Arya. It gave her courage. It gave her something to hold when chains cut into her skin. But in the shadows, another pair of eyes was watching. The soldier who had seen Kale with her. The one who had noticed the whispers, the bread, the small kindness. His grin was sharp, his heart filled with greed. In her secret, he saw power. In Kale's crime, he saw an opportunity. The next morning, the commander called the soldiers to the yard. His voice thundered. Today we march to burn another village. Today we show the galaxy our strength. The soldiers roared in answer. Weapons lifted, boots stamped. But one soldier stepped forward and shouted, "Commander, I must report treachery." The camp grew silent. All eyes turned to him. His grin spread wider as he pointed a finger toward Kale. "This one," he said loudly, "has broken your law. He speaks to the slave like she is human. He feeds her. He even gave her a name." The commander's eyes turned dark. Slowly, he walked toward Kale. The yard was so quiet now that even the wind seemed afraid. Kale stood straight. His fists tightened, but he did not speak. The commander's hand shot out, gripping Kale by the throat. He snarled, "Is it true? Do you defy me for an animal?" Kale's voice was steady, though his breath was cut short. "She is not an animal." Gasps spread through the yard. Soldiers looked at one another, shocked. No one had ever spoken those words aloud. The commander's grip tightened. His face twisted with fury. Then he threw Kale to the ground and barked to the guards, "Seize him." Two men rushed forward, striking Kale across the back, forcing him onto his knees. Blood ran from his lip, but his eyes stayed hard. The commander turned his gaze on Arya. She tried to shrink back, but her chains gave her nowhere to run. "So?" His voice was like poison. "You have bewitched one of my soldiers. You think yourself worthy of respect? You think you are more than a toy." He grabbed her chain and yanked her forward. She fell to the ground at his feet. The soldiers laughed, but the sound was uneasy. Some of them looked at Kale bleeding, defiant, and a strange silence passed through the crowd. Arya's chest heaved. Fear pressed heavy on her, but she forced herself to lift her head. Her lips trembled, but the word escaped anyway. "My name is Arya." The commander's boot slammed against her side, throwing her back against the dirt. She coughed, pain stabbing through her ribs. "Your name," the commander roared, "is nothing. You are nothing." But Kale shouted from the ground, his voice raw. "No. She has a name. You cannot take it from her." A soldier struck him across the face with a rifle. Blood sprayed, but Cale's voice did not break. Arya's tears blurred her vision. She wanted to crawl to him, to shield him, but her chains held her down. The commander raised his hand. Both of them will be punished. Let the army see what happens to traitors. The soldiers dragged Cale and Arya to the center of the yard. Chains tightened around his wrists, around her ankles. Some soldiers shouted for blood. Others stayed quiet, uneasy. None dared to step forward. The commander lifted his sword high. This is the price of mercy. This is the cost of weakness. The betrayer, the one who had exposed them, stood in the crowd with a smug smile. His eyes met Arya's, and she felt hatred burn inside her chest. The blade glinted in the sun. And the camp waited for blood. But in that moment, as Cale knelt, bruised and bound, he turned his head toward Arya. His lips formed the word again. Silent but unbroken, Arya, daughter heart shook. Chains could hold her body, but not her name. The punishment did not come at once. The commander wanted the whole camp to watch, to see fear, to learn obedience. So Cale and Arya were thrown into a wooden cage, bound in chains, waiting for morning. The night was long. The sky was heavy with clouds. Rain dripped through the cracks and touched their faces like cold fingers. Cale sat bleeding, his back against the wall. His arms were bruised, his lip cut open. Yet his eyes still burned with fire. Arya sat close, her chains rattling with every breath. She whispered, voice shaking, "They will kill us tomorrow." Cale turned his head toward her. His voice was rough, but steady. "Maybe, but tonight is not tomorrow." She looked at him, confused. But then she saw it's a small piece of metal he held in his hand. A shard, sharp and thin, stolen when no one was watching. Hope flickered in her chest. All night, Cale worked. He pressed the shard into the lock of her chains, twisting, cutting, forcing it. His fingers bled, but he did not stop. Every creak of metal was a risk. Every whisper of sound could bring a guard. Arya's heart raced. She watched the shadows outside the cage, afraid a soldier would appear at any moment. Then dash click, her chains fell loose. For the first time in years, her wrists were free. She touched them with trembling fingers, hardly believing. "Now you," she whispered, reaching for his chains. But Cale shook his head. "No, you must run." Her eyes widened. "Run alone." "Yes," he said firmly. "You can escape the forest. You can live. That is all that matters." "No," she cried in a low voice. "Not without you." Cale looked at her, his eyes soft. "Arya, you are my redemption. If you live, then I was not just another monster. Promise me you will run." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to argue, to refuse. But his eyes begged her to understand. Suddenly, shouts rang out in the camp. Torches flared. A horn sounded. Enemy attack. Explosions shook the ground. Arrows cut through the night. Soldiers scrambled, shouting orders, running to defend the camp. Cale's chance had come. "Go," he whispered fiercely. He kicked the cage door, smashing the lock with all his strength. The wood cracked open. Smoke and chaos filled the air outside. Arya hesitated only a moment, then crawled through the broken door. Her bare feet hit the mud. She looked back at him, chains still tight around his wrists. "Cale, run. Arya." He shouted, "Run." The camp was fire and chaos. Soldiers clashed with enemies in the dark. Screams filled the night. Arya ran, her heart pounding, weaving through shadows, ducking under blades, slipping past tents. The forest edge glowed ahead, dark and endless. Behind her, she heard the crash of steel. Cale had thrown himself into the fight, even chained, striking down a soldier who came too close to her. Blood sprayed. His voice roared above the battle. "Go, Arya!" She stumbled but kept running. Branches tore at her arms. Mud clung to her feet. But she did not stop. Every step away felt like leaving a piece of her soul behind at the edge of the forest. She turned once more. Through the smoke and fire, she saw him. Kale, surrounded, fighting with nothing but broken chains and rage. Their eyes met across the burning camp. He gave her the smallest nod. And in that nod was everything his command, his hope, his love. Tears streamed down her face. She whispered into the night, "Kale." Then she turned and vanished into the trees. The forest swallowed her. The sounds of war faded behind her. Every step carried pain, but also life. She held her name in her heart and his voice in her memory. She was free. But freedom had cost her everything. Approximately 800 words. Simple English, third-person style. The forest was endless. Dark branches stretched above her like black arms. The ground was wet with mud and leaves. Every breath burned her lungs. Every step shook her weak body. But Arya kept running, behind her. The flames of the camp lit the sky red. The screams of men faded slowly, like ghosts swallowed by the night. She wanted to turn back. She wanted to find Kale, but his last words were carved into her heart. "Run, Arya." Live. So she ran. When dawn came, the forest was quiet. Mist covered the trees, soft and cold. Arya collapsed near a stream, her body trembling. She drank water with cupped hands, her reflection broken by ripples. For the first time, she saw herself not a chained creature, not a prize, not an animal. She whispered, "Arya." And the forest carried her voice. She remembered his eyes, his voice, his sacrifice. He had given her bread, kindness, hope. But most of all, he had given her a name, and that name was now her shield. Days passed. She walked barefoot through wild lands, eating roots and berries, hiding from patrols. Every night, she dreamed of Kale. Sometimes he stood in fire. Sometimes he reached out his hand. Always, he whispered her name. At first, the memories crushed her with grief. But slowly, the grief became strength. Kale had given his life so that she could live. To waste that life in sorrow would be betrayal. She had to carry his legacy. She had to become more than what the world called her. One evening, she reached the ruins of a village. Burned houses, broken walls, silence. She walked among the ashes. Her heart heavy, and then voices. Children's voices. Her eyes widened as she followed the sound. In the ruins, hidden under a broken roof, she found them 3 children, thin and frightened, staring at her with wide eyes. They were like she once was, nameless, hopeless, lost. Arya knelt down slowly, her voice soft. "It's all right. I will not hurt you." The children did not speak. They only watched her. She thought of Kale, of how he had looked at her, not with hunger or cruelty, but with humanity. She felt tears rise as she whispered, "You are not animals. You are people. You deserve names." The children blinked, confused. Arya smiled through her pain. "I am Arya, and I will protect you." From that night, her path changed. She was no longer only running. She was guiding. She was teaching. Each child she found, she gave a name. Each name was a light in the darkness, a seed of humanity planted in broken soil. They followed her through forests and ruins. They ate together, slept together, whispered names to each other in the dark, and little by little, something grew. Not just survival, not just hope, but a family. Years later, when the war still raged and the world still burned, whispers began to spread. Whispers of a woman once chained, who now walked free. A woman who carried no sword, no crown, but carried something greater. She carried names. They called her the voice of the lost. They said she gave the broken a new life. They said she gave hope where there was none. And in the quiet of her heart, she always whispered the truth. It began with one man. It began with Cale. On a clear night, under a sky filled with stars, she stood at the edge of a river. The children, now stronger, braver, slept behind her. Arya looked at the sky, her voice soft, carried by the wind. They called me an animal. They tried to erase me. But you gave me a name, and with it, a soul. I will never forget you, Cale. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was not broken. She was whole. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if listening. And in that light, Arya knew his sacrifice was not wasted. She would live. She would lead. She would keep his legacy alive forever.